Well, hello and welcome everyone to our Licensure 101 today. We're delighted to see so many people joining us, and we're looking forward to spending some time with you talking about the licensure process. And we're even more excited to see everybody investing in your professional development and taking time to better understand what licensure is about. Please note, as Kelly mentioned, we'll be recording today's session so we can share that out with attendees, those who were unable to join us, plus adding it to our Student Services video library. My name is Kim McFarland, and I have the honor of serving as Assistant Dean of Student Services and Career Planning at the Mandel School. And for additional introductions, I'll turn it over to the team.
Right, and my name's Kelly Schmidt. I'm so excited to see you all here. I'm a student advancement specialist. So I work with Dean McFarland and Sharice, who I'm gonna pass it to also.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Sharice Muse, and I'm a student advancement specialist as well. And we work as a team with Kelly and under Dean McFarland. And welcome all.
All right, thanks, Kelly and Sharice. As we continue, I'm pleased to provide a brief roadmap of how we'll spend our time together today. After a quick welcome activity in a moment, we'll engage in a highly informative presentation presented by our faculty member, Dr. David Hussey, and then we'll transition to a robust Q&A discussion with some of our student and alumni panelists, Ashaya Strong, Michael Ann McCann, and Adam Ken. And then we will conclude our time together with your remaining questions and share some additional resources to help you get on track to prepare and successfully pass the licensure exam. Please be sure, as a reminder, to type your questions in the chat throughout the session, and our team will be monitoring those so we can integrate them throughout the session. And then we'll have an active Q&A time at the end of our time together, and you're welcome to come off mute and share those questions then as well. We've tried to intentionally integrate many of the questions that you submitted during registration, but if we happen to not get to something that you have a question or need resources about, please reach out to our team and we'll be happy to support you one-on-one after today's session. So with no further ado, I'll turn the next portion of our program over to Kelly. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thanks so much, Dean McFarland. All right, so I'm not going to do a very intense icebreaker, but just to set the mood a little bit, to see how we're all feeling, do a little temperature check. And if you don't know me already, I love dogs. So on a scale of dog, how are we feeling today? So in the chat, you can put the number that most resonates with you. I would say for me, today, I kind of feel like a 3 because I'm staring at a computer right now, but I'd love to be an 8. Like that's where I strive to be every day usually. So yeah, feel free. Awesome, seeing some 3s, 4s, 2s, maybe a 5. I feel like a 5 might be appropriate today. Great, thanks everyone for sharing that. And then we're actually gonna jump in. I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Hussey for his presentation. Take it away.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm gonna share my screen. Can people see the screen? Great. So let me talk a little bit about the the licensure exam and just give you sort of just some introduction about the process and how it works. And our panelist will really be able to kind of give you the nitty-gritty of both how to prepare for the licensure exam, as well as the kind of mechanics, having gone through it recently. First thing is to just understand that licensure is important. It's important for a profession, and it's also really an ongoing activity that once you become a licensed social worker, you have certain obligations and responsibilities and a certain credibility that comes with a licensure. So if you look at what are the reasons for licensure, first of all, it's to protect the public, that A license means that you have had some sort of special training and accreditation and review process as a professional to do the things you do within the scope of your practice. So it's important to keep in mind that this is something very valuable. And professions sometimes really work hard over time to get the credibility of being licensed. So it's the government sort of acknowledgement of the importance of social work in the landscape of public health and public welfare. So again, there's a credibility here, and there's an accreditation and a validation behind it that's really important. And it's also done to regulate the profession, to keep standards clear for the profession. There are guidelines, there are ethical codes of conduct that you need to follow. And unfortunately, sometimes professionals go astray. And there's also investigations and the ability to really try to protect the public so that the services they get are something that really are helpful and not compromised. So again, just a lot of important reasons for licensure, and it's an additional layer of credibility that you have. Now, the first thing that I'll tell you about licensure is it's sort of complicated. And by complicated, what I mean is you're dealing with multiple entities. You're not just dealing with sort of a single entity. And what we do, particularly out of Dean McFarland's office, is really try to make it as easy as possible and as supportive as possible for students. So we have multiple levels, but first of all, there are resources for students that are easy to find, that you can find on our webpage, that really have a lot of information. So I first want to just make you aware of that and have you realize that just on our own webpage and our own school site, you really find everything that you need and a lot of good information. Secondly, the school does offer the license exam preparation program through LEAP. And Dean McFarland is going to talk more about that. But this was a critical resource that the school decided it wanted to offer free of charge to our students, trying to find one of the best programs to help prepare students. So that is available to you, and I strongly encourage you to take advantage of it. You will need a letter of good standing too in your application process, and that's easy to obtain from the registrar's office. So that is something that can easily be provided for you. So just to sort of make that clear. So first bucket is kind of Case Western Reserve. Second bucket, the Ohio Counselor, Social Worker, Marriage and Family Therapist Board. So that's the board that we actually get our license from and that monitors our license. So being familiar with that website, being familiar with the board is important. The first step for licensure is to complete the application online. And what you'll notice in the process is there are fees involved. And because there's multiple entities, you're looking at multiple fees. But there is an application and a processing fee. Within the Counselor and Social Work Board, there's also an e-license site. So that's the site that really manages licensure for the board, a lot of the mechanics of it. So again, you'll notice there are layers here, but if you remember the three buckets, that's really what helps. The final bucket is the Association of Social Work Boards, ASWB. That's the national group that makes up the exam. So the exam that you're taking isn't just a local exam, but it's really national in terms of social work. So be aware of that. And at this site, there are, again, a number of useful resources, including practice tests. And one of the things that you're going to do as part of your prep is you're going to take a number of practice tests and practice questions. And those questions will supplement the studying and reviewing that you're doing. So you have two parts. One is your review through LEAP, through other resources. And then second is constantly taking practice tests. At the Mandel School, we don't typically use multiple choice tests. So the last time you experienced that most typically was in your undergraduate education. And there are strategies to how you take a multiple choice test. And that's part of what the LEAP preparation helps to remind you of and refresh you of. And then the practice questions help you to become more facile in understanding the strategies behind a multiple choice test. So 3 buckets. Each one of these has resources. Now, in the final bucket 2, what you'll notice is that when you do go to take your exam, PSI is the actual vendor that manages the actual exam. So ASWB contracts, and PSI is the new vendor as of January. So the mechanics of where do you go, what are the requirements, those kinds of things. PSI now is the vendor where you take the exam and that manages the exam. So it's important to keep that in mind. Now, just a bit about test preparation. The first thing, test anxiety is normal. So you have to just accept the fact that test anxiety is normal. One of the things that helps is your preparation. That's sort of 2-tiered. Your own course of study, the LEAP program, practice tests, those are the things that are going to also help you to gain confidence and to help deal with that anxiety. I do remind our students that one of the advantages you have is most of the content is fairly fresh. It's not that long ago that you had the courses that covered the content that's in the exam. So that's a plus. We do have some graduates who don't take the exam and they take it months or literally years later. Well, they're farther away from the course and the content. You are very close to it. A lot of it is refreshing. That's all it is. Now, there are multiple exams and multiple licensures to keep in mind for social work, ASWB, bachelor's, master's. And then after your master's, there's also the advanced generalist and the clinical. Those typically come 2 years after you get your degree and pass the exam. 2 years of practice are typically required before you could take those advanced generalist and the clinical and get the LISW. Do remember too, this is a lifelong process, that every 2 years you accumulate 30 hours of continuing education units and your license is reviewed. This is the way we keep up professionally with advances in the field, by getting continuing credit hours through seminars, webinars, other sorts of training events. That's how you keep current in the field. Many of those seminars are, you get some funding from your employer to do that because it's in your employer's interest to have a well-educated professional workforce. But just remember, it's not you get your license and it's done. You have a commitment to ongoing lifelong education as a professional, and that's part of how we keep the standards in the field. Dean McFarland will talk more about LEAP, but just to keep in mind, the exam itself, basically there's 170 questions, 150 20 or test questions. that they experiment with to see if they want to use them on the next version of the exam. You do get immediate feedback about whether or not you passed or failed. It's around a 70 to 75% rate where you need to be accurate in your answers. And you do have 4 hours. Many of our graduates report that they didn't need the 4 hours the whole time period, but it is available in case you do need it. These are the content areas on the exam. Human growth and development, about 27%. Assessment and intervention planning, about 24% of the exam. Interventions with clients and client systems, 24%. And then professional relationships, values, and ethics. So that gives you a pretty good idea of the major components, the major areas of the exam. And you could see how these areas flow very well from the coursework that you've taken here at the Mandel School. Now, I will highlight this examination guidebook. It's pretty thorough, and it gives you a ton of information about the exam and about preparing for it. It's 2024, it's very recent. So it's very easy to download this and kind of read it through yourself. You'll read about the master's exam. It also has practice questions. And at the ASWB website, there are also practice questions. So again, tons of resources are really available to you and tons of support to help you through the process. So what are the steps? First step is apply. Ohio Counselor and Social Work Marriage Family Therapist Board. So there is a fee attached to that, and it does then move into this e-license site where you register, create an ID, and password. Now remember, you're applying for the licensed social worker, the LSW exam. Then registration with the social work boards, ASWB. Again, here's another fee for that. Upon receipt and review of the above items, you'll receive an exam pre-approval email that you can then schedule the exam with PSI. Remember, PSI is the vendor. Then you schedule your appointment. You could do it online, or you could do it on the PSI website online, or you could call. They're open 24/7. So a couple things to keep in mind when you schedule your exam. Arrive early. You want to make sure you know exactly where you're going. Bring 2 photo IDs. Driver's license is typically your primary, and even your photo student ID card can be a secondary. You might not need the full 4 hours. Be careful. You really can't have, a lot of things in the exam. There are typically lockers where you could put coats and scarves and stuff like that, but you really go into it, without any notes or anything like that. And then other things to keep in mind, you will need to watch the laws and rules video, which you could find on the website. It's a short video, and there's also a PDF that gives a lot of information about licensure. And then if you haven't had a background check, many of you do in terms of your field placements, but that's another requirement. BCI is state, FBI is federal. They're each about $35. So, and you can find sites that actually do the background checks nearby. So there's a number of different sites. So I'm going to stop sharing there. We'll make that PDF PowerPoint available to you after so that you can click on some of those links. and look in more detail at what I've discussed. And that gives you just a general overview. Like I said, there's a lot of resources on our webpage, things like that, but this gives you an idea of sort of the entities that you're dealing with and the steps that you take in that process.
Thanks so much, Dr. Hussey. Sorry. And I just want to say too, I know it's with Ohio and other states have similar processes. So definitely stay connected with Mandel Student Services if you want to talk about other states. There's maybe a little slight differences, but the exam is the same for that intro to licensure social work. So yeah, go ahead, Sharice.
Alrighty, thanks, Kelly. So at this time, we'll open it up for Q&A. So I'll start with some questions, and whoever of any of the panelists that want to jump in can answer. So the first question is, what do you feel is most helpful when applying and studying for your licensure?
I'd really like the panelists to answer that question.
No, it was for the panelists. Any of the panelists
Okay.
can answer that.
While preparing for my LSW test, I had downloaded the behavioral health app. I'm trying to pull it up so I can show you guys the icon.
It's called a behavioral health pocket prep. It's a
Yes,
it's a
that's
purple one.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the one that I used, and those questions are almost exact to the test. And they actually have like the questions of the day, and then I guess like a question of a week. And then you could also like star questions that you want to come back around if you are like struggling with them. And then you could flag other areas, and then it'll keep score of the areas that you need to study more and the areas that you're doing well in. So I use that, and then as I also got this when I graduated. Let's see. I'm sorry. So I actually have a background in social work. So my bachelor's in social work, and they had gave us this prep, which is AATBS, Association for Advanced Training in the Behavioral Science. So I use these books, but this is just more so like laying out the information. If you need practice with answering questions regarding this information, then you should get the behavioral health. So I use it comes with like 5 different little booklets. I use the ethics one, and then I did like the interventions one.
Alrighty, thank you, Ishaya.
Mhm.
Did anyone else want to share their perspective or their experience? So
I think it's really important to know how best you learn, whether that's, I know there's a lot of practitioners who use YouTube. So like I had friends who like would have like a YouTube video going on in the background, or like if you need flashcards, you like to take notes, all that kind of stuff. So I was the student who waited like 5 years after graduation to take my exam. Because I never intended on getting my license. And so I panicked a little bit because it had been so long. So I was like, I think I ended up doing even like the study.com. They have like a licensure prep thing that I like did like the 30-day like free like bit. So, but yeah, just really figuring out like what works for you. I had also gotten those like that 5-pack of those books. And so like I would take those to work with me, and like I would, I'd pick like the ethics one or whatever, and then I would take that and I would read it like during work.
The YouTube piece that she was commenting on, someone actually had told me about RayTube. And when you go on YouTube, if you type in RayTube, he does a great job breaking down the questions as well. So that way you're able to break down the questions.
I had also taken the NASW has like the licensure prep course.
Okay.
It's like just a day, and there's a clinician, she's like been teaching it for like 20 something years, and she just goes through, because it's really more about like how the question is formed and like what they're really asking you. And so you really learn, she teaches you like how to kind of recognize the question styles, and like because a lot of people get caught up in like verbiage, like terminology. So just like learning how to read the questions on the exam is really, really important. And if you have like test anxiety, I mean, it really helps you recognize kind of what they're actually asking you. Not that they're tricking you, but like, I don't know, I found it helpful. And I think now NASW offers that class for free. It was not free when I took it.
Yes, they do. I was just gonna say that.
I can, I guess, offer some tips regarding some steps and or the process of gaining your license. I think if you're at your last year of practice, what I'm talking about, last year your school or last semester, you can start to submit. You can ask from school a good standing letter. You don't have to get your license after you graduate. You can get it while you're still in school, semi while you're still in school. Get a good standing letter from I guess the admission office, not admission, the school office, and you submit that letter to the board. And then back then I think I got this BCI and FBI check from the police station just next to our school. That's the most convenient way you can get that kind of BCI or BI check. I think it's kind of $6, something like that. And then you can you can submit the unofficial transcript to the board. With all of this paperwork, I think the board will permit you to take the ASWB exam before you get your diploma. So that's what I did. I asked the good standing letter on January, and I was permitted to take the exam, I think around March. And I picked around Cleveland, there are two locations. One is in Beechwood, I think. Another one is in Independence. I like the one in Beechwood. It's just some small details, and if you have preference. And I like to do afternoon because in the morning you have to get up so early to get there, and it's definitely not good for you if you have some anxiety. So it's gonna be kind of like a room that has a central glass and everybody is sitting in a cubicle. And there are some medical students and nursing students taking their exams, and you just do yours, and you will have a break in between if you need to go to restroom. I don't think they allow you to open your cabinet or something like that. See your stuff. That's kind of like some details of that. And at the day of your graduation, you get your diploma, you can take a picture of that and just send it to the person who, I guess, issued the license in the board. And I submitted at May 22nd. I think that's the day we had the ceremony. And the day after that, I got my license already. It can be that quick. So that's kind of like small steps on how to prepare exams. I recommend the method, I call it a quiz-driven method. So Michael and Ishia, I think you two mentioned about this two apps and also the books. It's very helpful. I use the app too and the book. You can just go on Amazon and get the book. What I mean quiz-driven is you use a quiz to give it a start. And it will touch upon not a lot of knowledge point you are not super familiar with. Use that as a motivation to read the book. I see a lot of people start to read the book just from chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. Quickly, you get bored and lost your motivation. Don't know why am I learning all of this stuff because I probably know most of them. But if you use quiz-driven method, it helps you locate what you're not good at and then learn those materials you're not good at repetitively. And so while you're preparing the exam, the learning itself is exam oriented. So you're learning in a way that how they want to exam you or how they want to test you. So while I was doing my LISW test, what I did was I do one quiz and I'll find out all the knowledge point it touch upon, and I just spend half an hour to an hour to learn all those chapters that it touches upon. So one afternoon, I will do 5 to 10 quizzes, but I will be reading like 2 or 3 chapters, related materials. So that's kind of quick. That's kind of also has to do with LSW and LISW. LSW is more knowledge based. It tests you, do you know about this? LISW is more about how do you judge a clinical case? What do you think you should do in this case? So that's kind of like a more difference. So if you're doing your LISW, then what helps is find those quizzes that has to do more to do with clinical case judgment. Last tip I think would be helpful is I don't recommend to do practice exam you downloaded or you bought from ASWB website at the end. I suggest to do it in the middle. In the middle, don't do it at the beginning, do it in the middle, because the way how to test you is a little bit different from the other materials you bought from market. They also have their different guidelines of how you should handle different cases. So once you finish that official practice exam, you don't want to waste it. You summarize all the rules they have from this exam. For example, back when I was taking that, I noticed all the quizzes about culture is always prioritizing culture over other factors. So whenever I see the quizzes like that, I always prioritize culture to choose as the right answer, because I think that's what ASW is trying to address, that as a clinician, you should prioritize that when you're making clinical judgment. And I summarized 8 or 10 rules. Those 8 or 10 rules really helped, because when I actually take the real exam, I encountered some very similar quizzes. I was able to use those rules to help me make clinical judgment, because a lot of the time the answers all look right. You don't know which one to choose. And these are kind of rules that can help you prioritize.
Alrighty, thank you. And thanks for all of your perspectives. And before we go to the next question, I just want to give each of the panelists the opportunity to just kind of give a background about yourself, just so students know who the panelists are. So if you want to start, Adam, it's up to you.
Okay, because I was talking, I guess. So I'm Adam Chin. So I graduated in 2018, and I got my license in 2018, and I got my I in 2020. So currently, I'm a founder of a private practice called Mind Track Counseling, and we focus on the treatment of ADHD, trauma, anxiety, and addiction. So my office is actually located in Cleveland Heights. And if you're interested in what we do, or in the future you might be interested in working with us, you can look at this website, mindtrackcounseling.com. Yeah, but right now I'm working as a clinician and also the director of this practice. If you have any question about direct practice, if you're interested in DP, and feel free to reach out to me.
Hello, my name is Ishay Strong. I am a LSW, BSW. I graduate in May. I'm an advanced standing intensive weekend student. So currently I'm a foster care social worker, and then I'm a student liaison at Tri-C as well. I think that was pretty much everything. And my concentration is in mental health.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Ann. I graduated in 2018. I did community practice and the MNO. So I was a dual degree student. And that was one of the reasons why I never planned on getting my license, was because I was community practice. And I've had a few different roles since I graduated. Most of them have been community practice focused. I'm currently a social worker at UH at Simon Cancer Center. Um, yeah.
Alrighty, thank you. And so we'll go on to the next question. The next question is, what do you wish you had known before applying for your license?
Okay, so mine really doesn't have to do anything with with the material. I was really upset when I made it to the facility and they were talking about my headband and they wanted me to take my headband off and they wanted to know if it was connected to the hair or something like that. So that was the only thing that I was upset about, was because it didn't outline anything about what you couldn't have in your hair. So that's the only thing I say. Other than that, I guess it was to be expected.
Alrighty. Did anyone else want to share? If not, we can go on to the next question. Alrighty. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry,
No.
I was gonna say, kind of in that same vein, I think the servicer has changed, as you said, the vendor, but they were pretty strict when I went to take the exam. And I would also um, encourage anybody with like accommodations, whether that's because of a diagnosis or anything, to really make sure that that is all taken care of. I want to say, I think you have to do it with like 6 weeks in advance, like make sure, like provide the documentation and everything. So yeah, so if you have an accommodation, whether it's because, like I said, the diagnosis, the physical, maybe kind of limitation, disability, kind of get that kind of squared away before you go, like not wait till last minute, because you probably are out of luck if you wait.
Yeah, I'll just reinforce that point. That's an excellent point. They'll call it non-standard. If you have non-standard testing request, that's kind of the term that they use. The key is to plan ahead. And there's a lot that they can do with that, but the key is to make sure that you plan ahead and understand what kind of documentation they're going to need.
Alrighty. Thanks. And so we'll go to the next question. What lesson did you learn throughout the process? So what did you learn as you were going through the process of obtaining your license?
I think being realistic with, I think like what kind of learner you are and like giving yourself enough time. I think a lot of people are really they are very ambitious when it comes to even like a study schedule or kind of like what they maybe know already. And I was many years away from like actual like the schooling that I had received. So um and I had never gone through school with the idea that I was going to take the exam. So just being realistic of like what I said earlier, like the kind of learner you are, but also like giving yourself a really adequate amount of time to get everything figured out. Um, and yeah, just really being realistic with yourself about what kind of support you need and like, staying healthy and all that good stuff.
Alrighty, anyone else?
I would just agree with what she has said. I wasn't one of those people that made like an extensive calendar and study. I actually waited to the last minute and pretty much like crammed. And then the night before, I fell asleep doing study guides and doing the quiz exams. Then I woke up first thing in the morning time doing the quiz exams, and I cried and did a little bit more. Um, so I say again, allowing yourself enough time to gradually process that information. Um, but it worked.
Alrighty. I know Kelly has been monitoring the chat. I don't know if we had any questions in chat. If not, we can open it up. You can take yourself off the mute and ask any questions of the panelists or Dr. Hussey at this time.
I just want to thank our panelists too for sharing. Oh, go ahead. If someone came off mute, go ahead.
So sorry. Yeah, hopefully you can hear
No,
me.
go ahead. Yep.
I had a question for Michael, I believe. Yes. Because she said that she was community practice focused. And so I would love to know your input and anyone else's input on the panel, how the licensure exam is much different or just helpful for somebody who is community practice focused. Like I know for me, you know, I was done in November, but I'm walking in May, obviously for commencement, and I've been kind of wrestling like, do I want to take the licensure exam? Do I not? Do I feel like it's necessary? Do I feel like it sets me apart? Is it going to help me as I start applying for jobs? So I would just love your input on that.
Yeah, I think it is very important for community practice folks to have their license. Yeah, so I knew that I was never going to be like a therapist. And so initially, like going through school, I did not see the need. But when it came to applying for jobs, so it even got to where the only reason why I got my license was because my community practice job, there was an aspect of it where I needed to be in a database and my license was required. So even though I wasn't doing direct practice, there was an aspect of my job at the time that I needed the license for. And so it definitely, I think it gives you better prospects. Because I also went through school knowing that, I mean, the jobs that I was applying for weren't going to necessarily say social work. They weren't going to be social worker positions. But I do think it does set you apart. And I mean, it shows that you went through the schooling for this, you might as well get the license for it. But I think it also gives you a lot more credibility in the, you know, when it comes to your job prospects, because you've shown that like, hey, like I'm knowledgeable in this, I'm licensed in this. So I wish that I'd gotten that advice 6 years ago. But I mean, you can be fun. You don't need to absolutely need to take it, but I very, very strongly recommend you getting the license.
I think it's good for when you're negotiating subsidy. So if you wait, then they'll give you a least amount than what they would have originally given to you if you would have had that credential. And then you will have to try to renegotiate it once you get the credential, but that doesn't necessarily mean you'll get the raise.
I'll share a little bit about the license regarding, since you mentioned about job. So I think it's very important if you get a license before you find a job, because it really gives you it really makes you stand out when you have a license, especially when you regarding finding a job. And even for community practice, especially if you're looking for a license as a community practice, it's important to study some direct practice knowledge. And also, I mean, vice versa, when I was taking my license, I was DP, I had to learn some community practice knowledge to pass the exam. And there's an independent license specifically for community practice too. After you get your LSW and when you're heading to your LISW, they're gonna ask you, do you want to take a clinical exam or do you want to take a general practice or community practice exam? So even as a community practice, you can still be an LISW. And a lot of places are looking for independent licensed clinicians to supervise the dependent licensed ones. So it will be really helpful. And especially in hospital, if you work at a hospital, I think how much pay you is also dependent on your license. Even if you're a very experienced one, it makes a difference when you have a dependent versus independent license.
especially folks in the M&O too, if you have a dual degree in some of those managerial positions. And once you get down the road in your career, that might be helpful just to bolster show that credential in the eye, or even with LSW, just kind of as a marker. So
Yeah.
I wanted to add that too, as a fellow community practice alum myself. So we did have another question in the chat about what are some of the specific strategies you used for questions. I know this was kind of mentioned, and this was a question that was submitted as well about, I think Adam, you had mentioned just cultural awareness and kind of, I know the one question too was just being mindful of that and how the best strategy to do that. So dual, I'm trying to like pull in some other questions, but specific strategies and then kind of around cultural awareness. How would you all, whoever wants to start, maybe Adam, because you had mentioned it earlier too.
I think several other parts. The tricky questions are always related with a child abuse, and culture, and suicide. The ASW is gonna have come up with so many questions surrounding these three areas. Then ask you, should you report? Who should you report? At what point you should report? Should you handle this by your own, or should you handle this with your supervisor? Should you call the child abuse, or should you call 911 or the police? With culture, right, they're gonna also mix with the suicide. So let's say this client is saying that, oh, I feel I'm gonna die, I'm gonna kill myself. But the client is coming from the culture that, they say that very often, that how are you gonna judge it? Right? You can pick, either way could go right. You can pick, I'm gonna favor the culture, not take it seriously. Ask client further that do you mean it or not? Or I'm gonna ask, or I'm just gonna go seriously, directly report a client. This happens in real life. I had a client who's from Asia, he just curses and swears, I'm gonna kill myself sometimes. Every time his adoptive father will send her to an ER. And that is not just a quiz, that's something cases that actually happen in real life. Besides of that, I think what they also touch upon a lot is child abuse. At what point you decide this is child abuse and this is not a child abuse, and how are you gonna judge if the kid's situation is safe or not? And that's really important to practice some case judgment quizzes like this, because I think a lot of people lose points on those other knowledges. For example, if they ask you if this kid is 80 years old, what do you think this kid is at what stage according to Erikson development theory, right? That's something that it's sometimes easy to tell, but for a case judgment, you really need to think it a little bit what ASW want you to prioritize.
So I'll go a little bit into another direction with kind of more logistically. So I realized when I was taking the exam that I was going through the questions very, very quickly. And so what I actually ended up doing was taking my hand off of the mouse and just sitting with my hands kind of in front of me, and actually just going through and slowly going through the question and really just kind of processing what it was asking. With that amount of questions and you get 4 hours, it doesn't feel like it's enough time, but it is, generally speaking. And then I know when I took my exam, you could highlight parts of the question, you could cross things out. That was just very, very helpful. You can flag questions to come back later. I just realized that I was just speeding through really, really quickly. So just realizing that you have more time than you think you have, or I guess it doesn't go as quickly as you would expect, and just kind of taking that extra little time to just kind of process what they're asking you.
Just a couple of insights too about that. The LEAP course, one of the reasons it's so good is it does cover the strategies. So a lot of time is spent covering that. General guides, in terms of strategies, read the question very carefully. look at the STEM. Oftentimes they'll say, what should you do first? So that word first would jump out at you. What do we normally do first? We assess before we intervene. So you'll have one answer will be assessment, 3 will be correct, there'll be interventions. But no, you assess first, then you intervene. Secondly, safety. Safety typically trumps everything. So that's another key. And then in terms of ethics and relationships, do not endorse any type of dual relationship. Client, asks to meet you socially. You have a good relationship with the client. You want to foster that. That's a dual relationship. You want to be very rigid and strict about understanding boundaries, at least for the test. So those are just a couple of hints. The LEAP course will cover much more of that.
Great.
All right, thanks. I think we have a raised hand, Mary.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to ask 2 quick questions. How do we register for the LEAP course? Oh, yep, someone just wrote it in the comments too.
We're going to put it in the chat. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then I had another question about scheduling the test. I went online to look to schedule and asked me for an authorization code.
I've heard of this happening to other students. If you want to email Mandel Student Services at case.edu, and this is just general too. I know we're getting close to 7, so we want to be mindful of time. But if you do have specific questions or run into issues or we didn't get to them today, you can always email Mandel Student Services. We're going to, I'll pass it to Dean McFarland soon so we can kind of cover these things quickly. But I did want to give an opportunity to any of the panelists before we wrap up. Any last thoughts or comments? I know we kind of ran through questions quickly, but yeah, feel free. Any last thoughts? Anyone? Good, we covered everything. All right, well, I'll pass it over to Dean McFarland to wrap things up, and we'll put a bunch of links in. So stay tuned. Hold on.
And we just wanted to say really quick to thank to our panelists and Dr. Hussey.
Yes, thank you so much.
Right.
Yes, I'd like to echo that thanks and appreciation. We're so grateful for all the time that all of you have spent with us today. This hour has flown by as we anticipated, and we hope that this gave everyone quite a few tips, tricks, and strategies to successfully prepare for the exam and then pass. And truly, as Kelly and Sharice mentioned, our team is here to support you. And as Dr. David Hussey mentioned previously, the LEAP preparation course for the licensure exam is something that the Mandel School has been offering for a number of years, free of charge to all of our students. And our team has dropped the link in the chat so that you can register. The registration is open all the way through February 23rd. So take some time, look into the process, and you're welcome to register for LEAP. It is a 6-month self-paced course with online modules. You walk through a study guide that is very comprehensive, has test questions, and a lot of good strategies for how to manage the exam and successfully pass it. And if you find that as you're going through the LEAP course, you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our team and we'll be happy to support you along the way. But again, you can register for LEAP, pace yourself throughout that 6 months, and we encourage you to find what strategies work best for you. We know that everyone learns differently, so if it's a study group, flashcards, LEAP, any combination of those things, we want you to be successful, and that's best for you to find your path as you're studying for this exam. In addition, as Dr. David Hussey mentioned earlier, we have a licensure page that our team continually updates on the Mandel School website. So we'll drop that in the chat and share that after today's session. And on that is the ASWB web link as well. So you can find out all the information for the tests, and you can also find on our website an Excel sheet with all of the different states and territories where tests can be taken. And this may be really helpful to many of our students on the call tonight who live around the country and are looking to become licensed elsewhere other than Ohio. So as we said, there are many resources at your disposal, including our team. We're happy to help support as you navigate licensure. And again, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our panelists and presenters and the Mandel Student Services team for a great session. We hope all of you have a great evening and best wishes with your licensure process. Thank you again.
Okay, go ahead, Dean McFarland. We're all ready.
Thank you.